The alarm screamed through the command center for the 43rd time that day. Minho didn't bother looking up anymore. Each alarm meant another settlement going dark, another 100 lives lost to the Vryn swarm. He stood at the main display screen, watching red dots disappear from the colony map one by one. 3 weeks ago, Talara 9 had been home to 15,000 souls. Now fewer than 4,000 remained, crowded into the main facility and its underground shelters. Outside the reinforced windows, the sky burned. Vryn bioships circled the planet like vultures, their organic hulls pulsing with sickly green light. They had all the time in the world. They knew the colony shields would fail soon. They knew no help was coming. The entire sector had been evacuated or destroyed. Talara 9 was alone. Administrator, power levels at 18%, called out a technician from across the room. Her voice shook. Everyone knew what 18% meant. The shields needed at least 15% to function. They had maybe 3 more hours. My NHO nodded slowly. He was 42 years old, and he looked 60. 3 weeks of constant stress, no sleep, and the weight of 4,000 lives had carved lines into his face that would never disappear. If he lived long enough for that to matter. Deep in the power plant beneath the main facility, Jiwan wiped sweat from her face. The heat down here was unbearable. Half the cooling systems had failed, and she didn't have the parts or the people to fix them. She stood in front of the main reactor core, watching the energy output numbers drop minute by minute. She was the chief engineer, and she had kept this dying system running far longer than anyone thought possible. Jiwan, we could boost output by 20% if we bypass the safety regulators, said Kyung, one of her assistants. He was young, barely 25, and his hands trembled as he held up his datapad. That would give us maybe 2 more hours before the reactor melts down and kills everyone, Jiwan replied. Her voice was tired but firm. The Vryn will kill us anyway, but it won't be the one who murders this colony. Keep the safeties engaged. Kyung nodded and walked away. Jiwan returned her attention to the reactor. She had been an engineer for 18 years, worked on 6 different colonies, and she had never felt this helpless. Engineering was about solving problems. But some problems didn't have solutions. Some problems just had endings. In the civilian shelters 3 levels below the surface, Hyan sat with a group of children. She was reading them a story, though her voice kept breaking. The children were from a dozen different species: humans, Talarians, Zendi, Gorlan. Their parents had fled to Talara 9 from other worlds, seeking safety from the Vryn advance. They had found only a slower death. Will the rescue ships come? Asked a small Talarian girl. Her name was Vex, and she was 7 years old. Her people had blue skin and large eyes that seemed to hold all the sadness in the universe. Hyan wanted to say yes. She wanted to promise that everything would be okay. But she had learned long ago that lies to children were the cruelest thing an adult could do. I don't know, sweetheart, but we're safe down here for now. It wasn't really a lie. They were safe. For now. For 3 more hours. On the surface, Captain Taiyang stood behind a plasma cannon, watching the sky. He commanded what remained of the Colonial Defense Force 37 soldiers with outdated weapons and no hope. They had been firing at the Vryn ships for weeks. They might as well have been throwing rocks. Captain, do you really think we can hold them? Asked Private Myray. She was 19 years old, fresh out of basic training when the Vryn arrived. She had grown up fast these past 3 weeks. No, Taiyang said simply. He saw no point in lying to his soldiers. But we can make them pay for every meter of ground. We can buy time for the people in the shelters. We can die with weapons in our hands instead of cowering in the dark. Myray nodded. She checked her plasma rifle for the 100th time. Around them, the other soldiers did the same. They were all afraid. But they would fight anyway. That's what soldiers did. Taiyang was 50 years old. He had fought in 3 border wars, trained on 4 different worlds, and earned medals he kept in a box somewhere because he never liked wearing them. He had always assumed he would die in battle someday. He just hadn't expected it to be in a battle. He couldn't win. The distress beacon continued broadcasting from the communications tower. It had been sending the same message for 21 days straight. This is Talara 9. We are under attack by Vrin forces. All routes of escape are blocked. Requesting immediate assistance. Please respond. Please help us. No one had responded. No one was coming. In the command center, Minho sat down at his personal terminal. He began recording a final message, a log entry for whoever might find this place after the Vrin left and moved on to their next target. His fingers moved slowly across the keyboard. This is Administrator Minho of Talara 9. If you're reading this, the colony has fallen. We held out for as long as we could. 23 days against impossible odds. I want whoever finds this to know that we didn't give up. Chief Engineer G1 kept the power running far longer than should have been possible. Captain Taiyang and his soldiers never stopped fighting. The civilians in the shelters showed courage I can barely comprehend. We believed someone would come. We were wrong, but we held on to hope until the very end. Remember Talara 9. Remember that we fought. He saved the message but didn't close the terminal. Maybe he would add more later. If there was a later, the shields flickered. Just for a second. But everyone in the command center saw it. The power drain was accelerating. 15%. 14%. The end was approaching faster than expected. On the sensor screen, the Vrin ships began moving into attack formation. They knew the shields were failing. They were preparing for the final assault. Landing pods would come first, carrying the warrior forms. Then the harvest would begin. Minho stood and walked to the main viewport. He stared up at the alien sky, watching the enemy ships circle like predators. He wondered if death would be quick. He hoped so. And then something impossible happened. The long-range sensors started screaming. A new contact had appeared on the edge of the system. A massive energy signature, moving at speeds the sensors couldn't properly calculate. It was heading straight for Talara 9, straight through the Vrin blockade. What is that? Someone shouted. Minho ran to the sensor station. He stared at the readings. The energy output was enormous. The velocity was insane. Whatever this ship was, it was unlike anything in the galactic database. The Vrin ships noticed it too. They began turning, reorienting their formation to face this new arrival. But the unknown vessel didn't slow down. It didn't ask questions. It simply smashed through the first Vrin bioship like it wasn't even there. Weapons fire lit up the darkness. The viewport filled with light as the unknown ship tore through the blockade with brutal efficiency. Vrin vessels exploded. Others tried to flee. The slaughter was beautiful and terrifying. Try to hail them, Minho ordered. Static filled the communications channel. Then a voice came through. It spoke perfect galactic standard, calm and professional. Talara 9. This is the Terran Expeditionary Fleet vessel Defiant. We received your distress call. Hold your position. Help has arrived. The command center fell silent. Someone started crying. Someone else laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and hysteria. Help had come after all. The communications officer stared at his console like it had grown a second head. His name was Daeon, and in 3 weeks of broadcasting distress calls, he had never received a single response. Now this. Terran Expeditionary Fleet. Terran meant Earth. Terran meant human. Humans? Minho said the word slowly, like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. That's impossible. Humans don't have faster-than-light travel. They're barely spacefaring. The Galactic Council rated them as emerging technology level. Well, sir, they're here now, Dahian replied, gesturing at the view screen. And they're shredding the Vrin fleet. It was true. The human warship moved through space like a shark through water. Its weapons fired in perfect rhythm, each shot finding its target. Vrin bioships tried to swarm it, tried to overwhelm it with numbers. The human vessel simply accelerated through them, its point defense systems destroying anything that got close. Energy beams cut through organic armor like it was paper. Explosions painted the darkness with fire. Minho watched 3 Vrin cruisers die in less than 20 seconds. He had seen those same ships destroy an entire planetary defense fleet 2 weeks ago. Now they were debris, burning fragments scattered across the void. Respond to their hail, Minho ordered. Tell them we're holding position. Tell them, his voice caught. Tell them thank you. Down in the power plant, Ji-Wan heard the announcement over the facility-wide speakers. A human warship. Rescue. Impossible. She pulled up her personal terminal and searched the colonial database for information on humanity. The file was small. The Council didn't pay much attention to primitive species. According to the records, humans were from a planet called Earth in the Sol system. They had achieved nuclear fusion 60 years ago. They had established colonies on their moon and on Mars 30 years ago. But faster than light travel? No. The Council projections said humanity wouldn't achieve FTL capability for at least another 100 years. Maybe 200. Yet here they were, fighting a war against the Vrin swarm. Winning. Ji-Wan stared at the technical specifications of the vessel called Defiant. The data was being collected by the colony's sensors in real time. The ship was huge, easily 2 kilometers long. Its energy output was higher than anything she had ever seen. Its weapon systems didn't match any known galactic design. This wasn't stolen technology. This wasn't copied from Council species. This was something humans had built themselves. How? She whispered to the empty room. How did they do this in 30 years? On the surface, Captain Taiyang watched the battle through his targeting scope. The Vrin ships were in chaos. Half of them were trying to escape. The other half were throwing everything they had at the human vessel. Nothing worked. The Defiant cut through the swarm like a blade through flesh. Sir, we're receiving multiple contacts, said Private Murray, checking her scanner. More ships dropping out of FTL. 2 more human vessels. Designations are Resolute and Horizon. Taiyang zoomed in with his scope. 3 human warships now filled the sky above Talara 9. They moved in perfect coordination, forming a defensive perimeter around the planet. One of them was launching smaller craft. Dozens of them, dropships. They're sending ground forces, Taiyang said. He felt something unfamiliar rising in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it. Hope Dot in the civilian shelters. Hyan held Little Vex close as the speakers announced the arrival of human ships. The children were asking questions, all talking at once, their voices high with confusion and excitement. The adults were crying. Some were praying. Others just sat in stunned silence. Are they nice? Vex asked. The humans? Are they nice people? Hyan thought about it. The galactic databases described humans as aggressive, territorial, and prone to violence. Their history was filled with wars. They had nearly destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons before they even left their planet. The Council had decided to quarantine them, to leave them alone until they matured as a species. But the Council had also left Talar 9 to die. And humans had come. I think they might be, Hyan said softly. I think they might be very nice. In the command center, Minho was speaking directly with the human ship's captain. Her name was Nari, and her face appeared on the main view screen. She looked human, of course. 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth. Brown skin, black hair pulled back in a military bun. She wore a uniform that was dark blue with silver trim. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp and focused. "Captain Nari, I don't understand," Minho said. "Our records say humanity doesn't have this technology. How are you here?" Nari smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had heard this question many times before and was tired of it. "Your records are out of date, Administrator. We've had FTL capability for 5 years now. We've been watching the Vryn expansion for most of that time." "Watching?" Minho felt anger flash through him. "You were watching while colonies died? While billions of people were slaughtered?" "We were preparing," Nari said. Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "We're one species with 1 star system. The Vryn swarm has consumed 20 systems. We couldn't just rush in and die heroically. We needed time to build ships, train crews, and develop weapons that could actually hurt them. We needed to become strong enough to make a difference." Minho wanted to argue, but he was looking at the view screen, watching human warships tear apart a Vryn fleet that had seemed unstoppable. He couldn't argue with results. Why now? He asked instead, "Why help us?" Nari's expression softened. "Because you needed help. Because we heard your distress call. Because someone has to stand up and fight, and we decided it would be us." She paused. "And because we know what it's like to be alone and afraid. Every human knows that feeling. We won't let others feel it if we can stop it." On the planet's surface, the first human dropship landed near Captain Taiyang's position. The rear ramp lowered, and soldiers emerged wearing powered armor. The armor was matte black, covered in sensors and weapon hardpoints. Each soldier moved with mechanical precision, their suits amplifying their strength and speed. The lead soldier approached Taiyang. His helmet retracted, revealing a human face. He looked young, maybe 30. His eyes were dark and serious. "Captain Taiyang? I'm Commander Junho, 3rd Marine Battalion. We're here to reinforce your position and evacuate civilians. We'll need your people to guide us to the shelter locations." Taiyang felt strange. 3 weeks of fighting alone, and suddenly there were reinforcements. Professional soldiers with advanced equipment, speaking his language, treating him with respect. "Commander, we have approximately 4,000 civilians in underground shelters. The power plant is failing. We have maybe 2 hours of shield capacity left." Junho nodded. "Not anymore. My engineers are already on their way to your power plant. We'll have your shields back to full strength in 30 minutes. Standard procedure." He said it like it was nothing. Like saving dying colonies was just another day at work. More dropships were landing. Human soldiers poured out, spreading across the colony in organized units. Some were setting up defensive positions. Others were heading for the civilian shelters. Taiyang watched them work with professional admiration. These weren't desperate survivors fighting with outdated weapons. These were warriors who had trained for this exact situation. In the power plant, G1 jumped when the door opened. Human soldiers entered, followed by people in engineering uniforms. One of them walked straight to her, a woman with short hair and confident movements. "Chief Engineer G1? I'm Lieutenant Soman, Fleet Engineering Corps. We're here to help with your reactor. My team can have your power output back to normal in about 20 minutes. G1 blinked. 20 minutes? The reactor is running on failing systems. Half the cooling network is offline. The containment field is degrading. It would take days to properly repair." Someone pulled out a device that looked like a scanner. "Not with our equipment. We deal with emergency reactor repairs all the time. Trust me, we fix worse." She turned to her team. "Dong Yoon, start with the cooling systems. Youngsu, check the containment field generators. I'll handle the main power flow. The human engineers moved like they had done this 1,000 times before. They probably had. Ji-won watched them work, feeling useless in her own power plant. They used tools she didn't recognize, materials she had never seen. Within 5 minutes, the reactor output started climbing. Within 10, the cooling systems came back online. Within 15, the shields were strengthening. Impossible. All of it impossible. But happening right in front of her eyes. In the command center, Minho watched the tactical display. The Vrin fleet was broken. More than half their ships were destroyed. The survivors were fleeing the system. The human warships weren't chasing them. They were staying in orbit around Talara 9, maintaining their defensive formation. Administrator, Nari said from the view screen, the immediate threat is neutralized. We'll remain in orbit while we assess the situation and coordinate evacuation if needed. You're safe now. Safe, Minho almost laughed. 3 weeks of certain death, and now he was safe. Saved by a species the galaxy had ignored. Rescued by humans who had somehow built an interstellar fleet in secret and decided to use it protecting strangers. Captain Nari, he said quietly, why didn't the Council know about your capabilities? Nari's smile turned cold. Because they didn't. Want to know, Administrator? They marked our Captain Taiyang had fought in 3 wars. He had seen orbital bombardments, plasma artillery duels, and close-quarters combat in burning cities. He thought he understood warfare. But watching the humans fight, the Vrin swarm made him realize he had been playing with toys while they wielded weapons of apocalypse. The battle feeds came from drones and cameras, mounted on human ships. Minho had authorized them to be displayed on screens throughout the colony so everyone could see their rescuers in action. Now Taiyang stood in the command center, watching footage that would haunt his dreams forever. The Defiant had caught a damaged Rin bioship, trying to limp away from the battle. The human warship didn't destroy it from a distance. Instead, it moved alongside the massive organic vessel and launched boarding pods. Dozens of them. They hit the Vrin ship's hull and burned through the living tissue like acid. Then the humans went inside. The camera feed switched to helmet recordings from the Marines. Taiyang watched as armored humans moved through the interior of the Vrin vessel. The inside of a Vrin ship was a nightmare. Pulsing walls of flesh. Organic corridors that contracted and expanded like throats. Biomatter that oozed and dripped. And everywhere, Vrin warrior forms waiting in ambush. The first Vrin that attacked looked like a nightmare given shape. 8 limbs ending in blades. A carapace that could deflect plasma fire. Speed that made it nearly invisible. It dropped from the ceiling onto a human Marine. The Marine caught it. His powered armor servos whined, and he grabbed the creature with both hands. Then he tore it in half. Taiyang felt his stomach turn. The Marine simply discarded the pieces and kept moving. Another Vrin attacked. The Marine raised his arm, and a flamethrower built into his armor turned the creature into burning biomass. The humans advanced through the ship methodically, room by room, burning everything they found. They're not just fighting, said Private Mireille, standing beside Taiyang. Her voice was quiet, almost reverent. They're exterminating. It was true. The humans weren't trying to capture the ship or study it. They were purging it. Every Vrin they found died. Every piece of organic technology was burned. When they reached the ship's core, the central brain mass that controlled everything, they planted explosives and evacuated. The Vrin vessel died screaming, its biosignature spiking in what could only be pain before it went dark forever. Efficient, Taiyang said softly. He meant it as a compliment. He had fought the Vrin for weeks and barely scratched them. The humans had destroyed an entire fleet in less than an hour. In the civilian shelters, Hyam watched different footage on the shelter's main screen. This showed the human dropships landing and soldiers helping people evacuate. She watched a human marine in full armor kneel down to talk to a frightened child. The marine's helmet retracted, showing a young man's face. He smiled and said something that made the child laugh. The contrast was jarring. The same species that was burning Vryn alive in their own ships was being gentle with refugees. The same hands that tore apart monsters were now handing out food, rations, and medical supplies. "They're very good at violence," said an elderly Gorlan man sitting next to Hyan. His name was something she couldn't pronounce, but he had been a soldier once. But they choose when to use it. That's the mark of true warriors. Not the capacity for violence, but the discipline to control it. Hyan thought about that. She watched human medics treating the injured, their movements quick and professional. She watched human engineers repairing damaged sections of the shelter, their tools more advanced than anything the colony had owned. She watched human soldiers standing guard at every entrance, weapons ready, eyes scanning for threats. These were protectors. Dangerous, yes. Deadly, absolutely. But they had come to protect, not to conquer. In the power plant, Ji-won worked alongside Lieutenant Soman and her team. The reactor was not only stable now, but running at 110% efficiency. Better than it had ever run, even when the colony was new. "How did you do this?" Ji-won asked, studying the modifications the humans had made. "These aren't standard galactic components. I don't even recognize half of these materials." Soman grinned. It was the grin of an engineer who loved her work. Human manufacturing. We couldn't buy galactic technology because nobody would sell to us. So we had to invent everything ourselves. Turns out, starting from scratch has advantages. No preconceptions about what's possible or impossible. She pulled up a schematic on her datapad. "See this? It's a thermal regulator made from carbon nanotubes and graphene composites. The galactic standard uses crystalline matrices that are expensive and fragile. Ours is cheaper, stronger, and more efficient. We built our entire technology base on being better, faster, and more adaptable than everyone else." Ji-won stared at the schematic. The design was elegant, almost beautiful in its simplicity. The council said humans were primitive. The council was looking at the wrong things, someone replied. They saw we didn't have their technology and assumed we were stupid. They didn't ask what we were building in the 30 years they ignored us. That was their mistake. Above them, on the surface, Commander Junho coordinated the evacuation with Captain Taiyang. The human Marines had secured every shelter entrance and were guiding civilians to the dropships in an orderly fashion. The most injured were being prioritized, loaded onto medical transports that would take them to the Resolute, which apparently had a fully equipped hospital. "Your soldiers work well together," Taiyang observed. "How long have you been fighting the Vryn?" Junho checked his tactical display before answering. "Active combat operations? About 8 months. But we've been training for 5 years. Every human Marine trains specifically to fight Vryn tactics. We've studied every battle, every defeat the Council species suffered. We learned from their mistakes. And the weapons? The armor?" Taiyang gestured at the Marines loading civilians. "This is military technology decades ahead of anything the Council has. We had motivation," Junho said simply. "When we realized the Vryn were out here, eating their way through the galaxy, and nobody was stopping them, we understood something important. Either we became strong enough to fight them, or humanity's first contact with the wider galaxy would be our extinction. We chose to fight." Taiyang watched a human Marine gently carry an injured Talarian child to a dropship. The Marine's armor could crush steel, but those hands were careful and soft. "You could have stayed hidden," Let the galaxy burn while you remain safe in your own system. Junho turned to look at him. His expression was serious, almost sad. Captain, humanity nearly destroyed itself a dozen times before we reached the stars. Nuclear war, climate collapse, biological weapons, artificial intelligence disasters. We survived by learning one crucial lesson. We're all in this together, or we're all dead together. When we heard the distress calls from the colonies, when we saw the Vryn burning worlds, staying hidden wasn't an option. Not if we wanted to still be human. In the command center, Minho was learning the scale of the human operation. Captain Nari was sharing tactical data, showing him the positions of other human fleets throughout the sector. The Defiant and her sister ships were just one battle group. There were 6 more, spread across 3 star systems, engaging Vryn forces. You're fighting on multiple fronts, Minho said, studying the tactical map. How many ships do you have? 43 capital ships, Nari replied. Another 100 smaller vessels. Cruisers, destroyers, frigates. We've been building them for 5 years. Every ship equipped with weapons designed specifically to kill Vryn bioships. Every crew trained for this war. Minho did the math in his head. That's impossible. The industrial capacity alone Earth is one planet, one system. The Council species have hundreds of worlds, thousands of shipyards. How did you build a fleet that size? Nari's expression was hard to read. Pride, maybe. Or perhaps just determination. We built it because we had to. Every human manufacturing facility was converted. Every resource we could gather was used. Asteroid mining, fusion power, automated shipyards in orbit around every planet and moon in our system. We turned Sol into a war machine. And we didn't do it to conquer anyone. We did it to save people like you. But why? Minho asked the question that had been eating at him. You didn't know us. We're strangers from species you've never even met. Why risk human lives for us? Nari was quiet for a moment. On the view screen behind her, Minho could see the bridge of the Defiant. Human crew members working at their stations, calm and professional. They had just fought a major battle, and they looked like it was routine. My grandmother lived through the Third World War, Nari finally said. She was 12 years old when the nuclear missiles started flying. She survived because a stranger pulled her into a shelter. Just a random person who saw a scared child and decided to help, even though it meant less food, less water, less space for themselves. That stranger saved my grandmother's life, which means they saved my life and the lives of my children. That's the human race, Administrator. We're the species that reaches out to strangers when everything is burning. Taiyang stood with Junho watching the last civilian board a dropship. The evacuation was complete. 4,000 souls saved. The human Marines were now setting up permanent defensive positions around the... 3 days after the battle, Minho sat in a conference room that hadn't existed before the humans arrived. They had built it in 8 hours, along with a new communications hub, a medical center, and housing for 200 people. Human construction methods were fast, efficient, and slightly terrifying to watch. Across the table sat First Officer Minji of the Resolute. She was younger than Captain Nari, maybe 30 years old, with sharp eyes and a way of speaking that made everything sound both friendly and final. She had arrived that morning with data files, historical records, and uncomfortable truths. I need to show you something, Minji said, pulling up a holographic display. This is the Galactic Council's file on Earth, specifically the section on First Contact Protocols. Minho leaned forward to read. The file was marked with council seals and dated 32 years ago. His blood went cold as he read the contents. Species, human, origin, soul system, planet Earth, technology level, pre-FTL, nuclear capable, assessment, highly aggressive, territorial, prone to internal conflict. Recommendation: Quarantine Protocol. No contact for minimum 500 years. Reasoning: Species shows insufficient social development for galactic integration. High risk of conflict if exposed to advanced technology prematurely. They knew about you, Minho said slowly. They knew humans existed and decided to leave you isolated. It gets worse, Minji said, her voice tight with controlled anger. She brought up another document. This is from 15 years ago. A human probe reached the edge of our system. It detected galactic communications traffic. We sent a response, asking for contact. The Council received it. She pulled up a response message. It was brief: request denied. Sol system remains under quarantine protocol. No contact authorized. Species development must occur naturally. This decision is final. NHO felt sick. They could have helped you. Shared technology brought you into the Council. Instead, they kept you trapped in your own system. They were afraid of us, Minji said. Read the assessment again. Aggressive, prone to conflict. They saw our history, our wars, and decided we were too dangerous. So they kept us isolated, hoping we either destroy ourselves or stay primitive forever. She paused. They didn't count on us becoming something else instead. She brought up more files. These were recent, marked with Human Intelligence Agency stamps. When we finally achieved FTL 5 years ago, we started exploring. We discovered the truth. Not just about the quarantine, but about the Council itself. Do you know why they really kept us isolated? Minho shook his head. Because we didn't fit their model, Minji explained. The Council is built on species that developed slowly, peacefully. They had thousands of years to work out their conflicts before reaching the stars. Humanity didn't have that luxury. We nearly killed ourselves and learned to cooperate the hard way. We understand violence in ways they never had to. That terrified them. She pulled up another file. This one showed military assessments, Council fleet deployments, technological capabilities. When the Vrin first appeared 3 years ago, the Council had everything they needed to stop them. Superior numbers, established infrastructure, defensive positions. They should have won easily. Do you know why they didn't? They weren't willing to fight, Minho said quietly, understanding dawning. Exactly. The Council species are peaceful. They've been peaceful for so long, they forgot how to be anything else. When the Vrin started attacking, they tried diplomacy. Then they tried economic sanctions. Then they tried defensive warfare. None of it worked because the Vrin don't negotiate. They don't retreat. They consume. Minji's expression was grim. By the time the Council realized they needed to actually fight, it was too late. The Vrin had momentum. Colonies started falling. Species began evacuating their home systems. The Council fleet fought a few battles, lost badly, and retreated. They're still retreating. And you arrived, Minho said. We arrived. The species the Council thought was too violent, too aggressive, too dangerous. We showed up with warships and weapons and a willingness to use them. Turns out, sometimes the galaxy needs monsters to fight monsters. In the rebuilt shelters, now far more comfortable than before, Hyan sat with several other civilians listening to a human doctor explain the situation. The doctor's name was Yunji, and she had been treating refugees for the past 3 days. Now she was sharing information that the Council had kept hidden. The Council knew the Vrin were coming, Yunji said. They detected the swarm's advance 2 years before the first attacks. They had time to prepare, to fortify colonies, to evacuate civilians. They chose not to because they thought it would provoke the Vrin. They believed peaceful coexistence was possible. A Talarian refugee raised his hand. But the Vrin don't do peaceful coexistence. They consume everything they find. Yes, Yoonji agreed. Humanity figured that out within 3 months of detecting them. We studied the Vrin biology, their behavior patterns, their expansion rate. We concluded they were an existential threat that couldn't be negotiated with. So we started building weapons. But why didn't the council do the same? Asked an elderly human woman. She had been a refugee before arriving at Talaranine, fleeing from another fallen colony. Yoonji was quiet for a moment. Because building weapons means accepting that violence is sometimes necessary. The council species had evolved past that acceptance. They had created a society where war was unthinkable. It made them peaceful. It also made them unprepared. Hyen spoke up. So humanity was isolated because you hadn't evolved past violence yet? That's what they thought, Yoonji replied. But they were wrong. We didn't evolve past violence. We learned to control it, to direct it, to use it only when necessary. There's a difference between being peaceful and being harmless. The council became harmless. Humanity stayed dangerous, but chose to be good. In the power plant, now running at 120% efficiency, Jiwon worked with Lieutenant Soman on new modifications. The humans weren't just repairing the colony's infrastructure. They were upgrading it, teaching the locals, sharing technology freely. This doesn't make sense, Jiwon said, watching Soman demonstrate a new power coupling design. This technology is worth billions. You could charge us for it. You could demand payment for the rescue. Instead, you're giving it away. Soman laughed. Charge you what? You just survived an extinction event. What are you going to pay us with? No, this is part of our mission. We help colonies survive, and we make sure they can defend themselves next time. Information wants to be free anyway. That's an old human saying. But surely Earth needs resources, Jiwon pressed. You've built a fleet. That costs money, materials, energy. You must need something in return. Soman put down her tools and turned to face Jiwon directly. You want to know what Earth gets out of this? We get to keep being human. We get to look at ourselves in the mirror and know we tried to help. We get to build a galaxy where species work together instead of hiding in fear. That's worth more than any resource. She picked up her tools again. Besides, we're not saints. We're building alliances. Every colony we save, every species we help, that's another potential friend. Another trading partner. Another voice saying that humanity belongs in the stars. The council tried to keep us isolated. We're proving them wrong by being the thing they refuse to be helpful. In the temporary barracks, Captain Taiyang was training with Commander Junho and the human Marines. The humans had offered to share combat techniques, tactics, and equipment with anyone who wanted to learn. 30 of Taiyang's soldiers had volunteered immediately. The training was brutal. Human combat doctrine was aggressive, fast-paced, and relied on overwhelming firepower. But it was also disciplined, precise, and adaptable. Taiyang watched his soldiers learn to use human weapons, practice human tactics, and adopt human strategies. You fight differently than any military force I've trained with, Taiyang said during a break. The council species fight defensively, trying to minimize casualties and protect territory. You fight to win. Junho nodded. We learned from history. Every major human civilization that fell did so because they fought not to lose instead of fighting to win. There's a difference. When you fight not to lose, you're reactive, cautious, afraid to take risks. When you fight to win, you're proactive, aggressive, willing to accept losses to achieve victory. The council thinks that's barbaric, Taiyang observed. The council is losing, Junho replied bluntly. We're not. Being thought of as barbaric is a price we're willing to pay if it means saving lives. That evening, Minho called a gathering in the main plaza. Every civilian who could walk attended. Captain Nari was there, along with Minji, Junho, and representatives from all 3 human warships. Minho stood on a platform that human engineers had built, looking out at 4,000 faces representing a dozen different species. "You all deserve to know the truth," Minho began. "The Galactic Council knew about humanity 30 years ago. They decided to keep Earth isolated, to deny humans access to galactic society. They thought humans were too violent, too dangerous. They were afraid of what humanity might become." He paused, letting that sink in. The Council was right to be afraid, but wrong about the reason. Humanity became dangerous. But they chose to be dangerous to our enemies, not to innocent people. They chose to use their strength to protect, not to conquer. Minho gestured to the humans standing best 2 weeks after the battle. Talara 9 looked like a different world. Human construction teams had rebuilt the damaged settlements. New power generators hummed efficiently in underground facilities. Shield emitters, far more powerful than the old ones, stood sentinel around the colony. The planet was no longer dying. It was thriving. Minho stood in the rebuilt command center, looking at a star map that showed the entire sector. Red markers indicated systems under Vrin attack. Blue markers showed human fleet positions. Green markers were colonies that had been saved. There were a lot of red markers, but the blue markers were moving, and more green markers appeared each day. Captain Nari stood beside him. In 2 weeks, she had become something like a friend, or at least someone who understood the weight of command, the burden of being responsible for thousands of lives. "The Defiant is leaving tomorrow," Nari said. "We received distress calls from 3 more colonies. We have to respond." "I know," Minho replied. He had known this day would come. The humans couldn't stay at Talara 9 forever. There were too many other people who needed help. "Are you taking volunteers?" "All of them," Nari confirmed. Captain Taiyang and his soldiers. Engineer Jiwan and her team. Dr. Hyan and about 40 civilians who want to serve as medical staff or support personnel. "Your colony is giving us more than 100 volunteers. They want to help," Minho said. "You showed them that fighting back is possible, that the Vrin can be beaten. They want to be part of that." Nari was quiet for a moment. "I need to be honest with you, Administrator. This war isn't over. We're winning battles, but the Vrin swarm is huge. We're one species with 43 ships trying to hold back a tide that's been consuming the galaxy for years. We'll save as many people as we can, but we can't save everyone." "I know," Minho said. He did know, but he also knew something else. 2 weeks ago, we thought we were all going to die. We had given up hope. Then you arrived. Maybe you can't save everyone, but you're trying. That matters more than you realize." In the barracks, Captain Taiyang was packing his equipment. Private Mireille stood nearby, also preparing to leave. She was one of the 30 soldiers who had volunteered to join the human fleet. "Young, eager, and no longer afraid. Are you scared?" Mireille asked. Taeyang thought about it. "Yes, but I'm also excited. For 3 weeks, we fought a battle we couldn't win. Now we're joining a force that's actually defeating the Vrin. We're not just surviving anymore. We're fighting back." Commander Junho entered the barracks. "Captain, the dropship leaves in 4 hours. Make sure your people are ready." "We'll be ready," Taiyang confirmed. He looked at Junho. "Thank you for training us, for treating us like equals instead of refugees." Junho smiled. "You're warriors. You fought for weeks with outdated equipment and no hope. That's worth more than any training. We're honored to have you with us." Down in the power plant, Jiwan was saying goodbye to her assistant Kyung. He wasn't coming with her. Someone had to stay and maintain the colony systems. Kyung had volunteered for that duty. "I've uploaded all the modifications to the colony database," Jiwan said, running through the checklist one more time. The humans left detailed manuals for everything. If something breaks, the instructions are there. I'll take care of it, Kyung promised. He looked nervous. Are you sure about this? Going with them? You don't have to fight. I'm not fighting, Ji-won corrected. I'm engineering. The human ships need people who understand galactic technology. I can help bridge the gap between human and council systems. I can make a difference. She smiled. Besides, I want to see what else they've built. Lieutenant Soman told me about the shipyards orbiting Earth. Thousands of construction drones working 24 hours a day, building vessels designed to save lives. I want to be part of that. In the medical center, Hyan was training the staff who would remain at Talara 9. The humans had left behind medical equipment, supplies, and detailed instructions. The colony now had better healthcare than most council worlds. Remember, Hyan said to the young Talarian nurse who would take over her duties, the nanomedical kits are one use only. Don't waste them. The human doctors said they'll send supply shipments every month, but we need to be careful with resources. The nurse nodded, taking notes on a datapad. Dr. Hyan, why are you leaving? You could stay here, help rebuild. Hyan thought about little Vex, the 7-year-old Talarian girl who had asked if the humans were nice. Vex was safe now. She would grow up on Talara 9, maybe become a doctor herself someday. But there were thousands of other children out there, in colonies under attack, who needed help. Because I can do more good on the Defiant, Hyan said simply. Every colony they save will need medical support. I can provide that. I can make sure fewer people die. That evening, the entire colony gathered in the main plaza for a departure ceremony. The 3 human warships hung in orbit above, their lights visible even in daylight. Dropships waited on landing pads, ready to carry volunteers to their new lives. Minho stood at the podium. Behind him were Nari, Junho, and Minji. Around the plaza, thousands of people from dozens of species waited to hear his final words. 14 days ago, we were dying, Minho began. We had given up hope. We believed no help would come. We were wrong. He gestured to the humans. These people came from a species the galaxy tried to forget. A species that was isolated, feared, and denied their place among the stars. They could have stayed hidden. They could have let us die. Instead, they built a fleet and came to our rescue. Minho's voice grew stronger. Today, 100 of our people are leaving with them. Soldiers, engineers, doctors, and civilians. They're joining a mission to save other colonies, to fight the Vryn, to build a galaxy worth living in. We should be proud of them. He paused, looking out at the crowd. But we who remain also have a duty. We must rebuild. We must prepare. We must make sure that if the Vryn return, we can defend ourselves. The humans are giving us weapons, training, and technology. We must use them wisely. Captain Nari stepped forward. Administrator Minho is right. We can't protect every world forever. Our goal is to help you protect yourselves. We're not building an empire. We're building a network of free worlds that support each other. She pulled up a holographic display showing the sector. The Galactic Council is still retreating. They're abandoning colony after colony. We're asking those colonies to join us instead, to form a new alliance based on mutual protection and shared strength. Talara 9 will be one of the founding members. Minji spoke next. We're calling it the Free Worlds Coalition. Any species can join. Any colony can participate. The only requirements are that you defend each other, share resources when possible, and stand against threats together. The humans will provide military support, but this isn't a human empire. This is something new. Something better. Taiyang stepped forward, representing the volunteers. 2 weeks ago, I was ready to die defending this colony. Now I'm leaving to defend other colonies. I'm not afraid anymore. None of us are. The humans showed us that the Vrin can be beaten. They showed us that courage and strength still matter. They showed us that we're not alone. He looked at his fellow volunteers, a mixture of species and backgrounds united by a common purpose. We're not just joining the human fleet. We're becoming part of something larger. A movement. A resistance. A promise that the galaxy doesn't belong to monsters. It belongs to those brave enough to fight for it. The ceremony ended with no tears. There was sadness at parting, but it was overwhelmed by hope, determination, and pride. The dropships lifted off one by one, carrying volunteers to the warships above. Minho watched them go, feeling both loss and satisfaction. Ji-Won sat in the dropship next to Lieutenant Soman, looking down at Talara 9 through the viewport. The colony was shrinking below them, becoming smaller and smaller. But it was intact, alive, safe. Having second thoughts? Soman asked. No, Ji-Won replied. I'm having first thoughts about the future. What we can build. What we can create. The humans showed us that technology should serve life, not profit. That engineering should solve problems, not create new ones. I want to be part of that. In another dropship, Hyun sat with a group of civilians who had volunteered for medical services. They were talking quietly, discussing what they might face, what they might see. One of them asked if she was scared. Terrified, Hyun admitted, but also certain. The Vrin took my homeworld. They took my family. For years, I've been running, hiding, surviving. Now I get to fight back. Not with weapons, but by saving lives. By making sure fewer people suffer what I suffered. Captain Taiyang sat with his soldiers in a third dropship. They were quiet, professional, ready. Private Mireille sat across from him, checking her new human-made rifle for the 10th time. Sir, she said, do you think we can actually win? Against the entire Vrin swarm? Taiyang considered the question carefully. I don't know if we can win, but I know we can fight. I know we can save lives. I know we can make the Vrin pay for every world they try to take. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes just refusing to give up is victory. Aboard the Defiant, Captain Nari stood on the bridge, watching the volunteers arrive. 100 new faces from Talara 9, 100 new stories, 100 new reasons to keep fighting. First Officer Minji,